Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel, Kelly Teaches Stuff, and today's lesson is the entries L, M, N, and O for the Encyclopedia project. So welcome back. And before we get started, I want to give a shout out to a 6-1 student who wrote a haiku poem about a unicorn dying. So she said, please turn in your work. If it is not submitted, a unicorn dies. So good job, 6-1 students. And boys and girls, if you have things you want to share, let your teachers know, and we can give a shout out at the beginning of our lessons. And hopefully that you can be highlighted next week. All right, so moving on. I want to talk just a little bit about our expectations before we get started. One of our expectations, remember that we talked about last week, was making sure that we do the very best, right? Do the very best that you can do. Make sure that you're writing as much as you can do in your situation. And try, I know that all the teachers have said we need at least one paragraph, a complete paragraph, which should be, 5 to 6 sentences. Again, write more if you're in the middle of a story. And it's been good to see that some students have been writing an entire story. And so it's fun to read all of the things that you're doing. And let's move on. So today we're starting with the letter L. So some ideas for the letter L. If we look up here on the screen, we see life-changing experience. So we think about a life-changing experience, boys and girls. We're talking about something that is changing like your whole world. And right now, one life-changing experience that we have, obviously, is this quarantine and this pandemic, because we've never lived through this before. So you could write about that and how it has changed your life, and even thinking about moving forward. What is that going to mean for you? How is this going to change, your thoughts and feelings about the way that you live? The second one is loss. You could talk about loss of a pet or a loved one. Luck or lucky. Love, the library, listening, learning. Maybe you're learning something new right now. I know some of you have started to try some new things since you have a little more free time, and some of your sports have been canceled. Another possibility, a lesson I learned the hard way. Then lefty, being a lefty or left-handed person, or maybe you live with a left-handed person and things are different there. Or lightning. We're getting ready to have a storm right now, so we might hear some thunder pretty soon. So those are some examples for the letter L. I'm going to share with you a few things that I did, and just to give you some ideas. But remember, these are just suggestions, okay? You can write anything on the letter L that you want. So some things that I wrote about, and you'll notice that I have several entries under L. If they're short, I wrote more, okay? So you see that my letter L is love, but it's short, so I added more to that. So I wrote, love is a tricky thing. It's messy. It's wonderful. It leads to a full heart and a broken one, and sometimes pieces that are just missing. Like I said, tricky. Okay, but now that was short, so I did another topic, and I wrote a topic on loss. And I wrote, I had my share of this word, meaning loss, and it's back to that word above it, love. In order to truly experience loss, though, boys and girls, you must have experienced the love part. I've loved and lost many people in my life, my grandparents, my parents, beautiful niece, friends, children's friends, and beloved pets along the way. And so in my book, I wrote, I'm going to stop here because I'm out of tissues. I know a lot about loss, and I know some of you might too. So then I wrote about less, right? Sometimes less is more. See the entry on Chris. Remember, Chris was my husband. There's so much I could write about him, but truly, if you love someone to the moon and back, enough said. It doesn't get much better than that. And then I wrote about lilacs. Lilacs are one of my very favorite flowers. They were my mom's, my grandmother's favorite, and you can read about that. So that was for the letter L, okay? So let's move on to the letter M. So for the letter M, you could write about your mom or your mama, or maybe even a grandma. Movies that you love or hate. Now, if you're going to write about a movie, you can't just say that you love this particular movie and then not say why, right? You're going to have to add in some information about that. So talk about the characters, talk about something that you loved. Maybe it was the setting. Maybe it was the storyline. You know, you're not just going to say, oh, I like this movie because it was cool or had great cars or whatever. You're going to really want to go into detail, so much detail that maybe we want to see that movie after we heard how great it was. Or maybe you want to talk about a movie that was awful. Maybe you watched a movie and you felt like that's 2 hours of your life that you're never going to get back again. So talk about that if you want to. If there's more than one, write if movies that you loved or movies that you hated, write those in a complete paragraph, but make sure that you give enough detail so that either the person wants to read it, wants to see it, not read it, or not want to. Middle school life. All right. So you could talk about that, especially since you guys are sixth graders. You could think about how at the beginning of the year you started sixth grade life, right? You had lockers, trying to navigate the hallways, funny things that happened in your class, funny things that might have happened in gym. You could talk about your besties, anything like that. Again, the more details, the better. All right, math. You could talk about math or a math class and talk about your math teacher and things that you learned. Even right now, I know a lot of you, instead of having your math teacher, you're learning through Khan Academy. You could talk about the differences between that. Another for M, missing out. I know that a lot of us are feeling right now that we're missing out on a lot of things that we would like to be doing. Vacations, visiting friends, just being able to go out to restaurants or the movies, right? So you could talk about all the different things right now that you might feel that you're missing out on. The next one is like a magical moment. So maybe there was a magical moment that you had in your life. When I think about this, boys and girls, I kind of think about things in nature that I have been very fortunate to see. Um, I know I talked to you about the fish that I had seen down in John Penny Camp. And one time I pulled into the driveway after rain, and all of the toads had hatched. And there were literally so many that you had to watch where you stepped. This is before we had videos on our phones, so I didn't get to capture that. But when I think about magical moments, I'll probably never ever have a moment like that where everything hatched at the same time and the yard was literally alive with these tiny, tiny little toads. It was very cool. So maybe there's a mystery. Let's look at the next one, a mystery. Maybe there's a mystery that you want to talk about. It could be a book, but it could be a mystery surrounding something in the house that you have or something that you found that is very interesting. Look at the next one, making memories or mischief. Maybe you played a cool trick on a brother or a parent and or maybe you just made a really cool memory with your family. And sorry, that is my dog barking in the background. Mixed up day. Maybe you had a day where literally everything went bad, kind of like the book, Alexandra and the Horrible, Terrible, Very Bad Day. Could be something like that. You could talk about manners, right? Manners that you maybe wish people had, or messages. That you could talk about text messages that you got from different people, or money, right? Everybody likes money. So you could talk about maybe things that you want to get when you save up a certain amount of money, or you could talk about money that you might need for college or anything like that. All right, so let's go and look at M. So for my M entry, I put my 6-word memoir here. But actually, I'm going to teach you guys that for the letter S. I had done some other things and worked around my template. So let's see here. I'm going to pause for just a minute and check on this dog. All right, let's get back to where we were. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so for the letter M, I wrote about my mama. She, to me, was just the most amazing person on this earth. Um, and I miss her a lot. She's in heaven right now, so she's been gone quite a while. And if you want to read that, go read my entry on her, but you might want to write about your mom and talk about the things that make her so fabulous or wonderful. And especially right now, boys and girls, when we think about the fact that your parents are having to, be responsible for all the things that they're doing. A lot of them are still working and they're trying to do their jobs and they're trying to help you with their schoolwork. That's a lot of pressure. So you might want to write about your mom right now and just think about all the things that your moms are doing for you to make sure that you're successful. All right, let's see what else. We're on M. So money, messages. I think we're good there. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the letter N. So for the letter N, you could talk about your Nana, right, or your Nan, your grandma. In North Carolina, you could talk about where you're living right now. You could compare North Carolina to other places that you've lived, talk about the pros and the cons of each. I've been in North Carolina, I think now about 18 years, and I really like it now. Nuisances. All right, things that annoy you or that are nuisances in your life. One of them is a barking dog in the middle of a live recording. That is a nuisance. All right, you could talk about naps. You could talk about your neighborhood or your neighbors. Boys and girls, I have really fond memories when I was young, like in kindergarten, and we lived in Alexandria, Virginia. We lived on this court, and in that court itself, there were the 6 kids in my house. There were the 4 kids next door to us, and the 3 girls across the street. There were lots of pets, and it was so cool because we would all have our bikes and we'd be riding around together in the court and playing games together and hide and seek. And because there were so many kids, we played hide and seek. There was all kinds of places to hide. So we had a lot of good neighborhood times. I remember distinctly, especially when I was little, with all the children in the neighborhood. So you could talk about that. The next one is neat stuff, maybe stuff that you find that's really neat. You could talk about it. I know some of you have toys and games and things that I haven't seen or other people haven't seen, and you could write about that. And especially because when you're older, you might not have those. If you want to share this book with your kids, so it'd be kind of cool to go back and reminisce about that. Noise or noises. Good noises or bad noises. You could talk about music. You could talk about how irritating it is when your dog is barking, when you're trying to talk or teach. Notes. Maybe you have some notes from a friend and you want to type those up, or notes that you wrote in a journal that you want to add here. You could write notes to yourself. Looking at the next column, nerves, things that get on my nerves. So if you're going to make a list, one thing I want to tell you guys here is that most of you probably have all of your lists by now. Remember that one of the requirements was you have at least one list, but not more than 5. So you need to go back and look at your entries and see how many listed you have. I know in the last entries that were required, a lot of the students wrote lists. And so I put a note on there that you're probably done now. So if you do want to write about this, that's perfectly fine, but it should be in the form of a paragraph. And remember that you should give details, right? Make sure that you're using descriptive language. Make sure that you're really talking in depth about the things that really get on your nerves. Nature, you could talk about nature. Think about walks or hikes that you've gone on. Think about things that you might have seen in your backyard or vacations. I know a lot of you went to Disney World. Maybe you took the tram that went through the jungle, or maybe you've been to zoos. Maybe you just want to look outside your window and write a poem about nature. right? And finally, nighttime. Um, you could talk about scary things in the night or things that you like about the night or anything that's going on there. All right, so let's see what I did with N. So for N, I wrote about a North Carolina conversation, and you could do this too if you wanted and say North Carolina conversation. I remember when we first moved from into North Carolina from Virginia, I was not familiar with all the wildlife here. I knew I knew a lot of the things, the creatures that were around my house in Virginia, but I didn't know everything here. So I just laughed because this conversation between my husband and I was so silly. I wanted to put it in my book to remember it. And if there was a silly conversation that you remember having, you could add that too and write North Carolina conversation. So I'm going to share this one with you just because it was funny. So the title was North Carolina Conversation. I was gardening in the backyard shortly after we moved to Youngsville. Chris, my husband, was up on the ladder putting a roof on a garden shed that he built. And our conversation went like this. Me, digging. Honey, what is this? Is this a worm or a snake? Chris, very nonchalantly, I will tell you. Does it have eyes? Me, yes, definitely yes. Chris, it's a snake. Me, really? It doesn't look like a snake, but it does have eyes. Plus, it's so far down in the soil. The holes I dug are about a foot deep. Chris, if it's got eyes, it's a snake. Me? Really? Are you sure? I've never seen a snake like this. I'm going to Google it when I get inside. Well, I did Google it, and guess what? It really was a snake. So it was a worm snake to be exact, and it had siblings. After I looked it up, I went back to dig only to find about 8 more of these worm snakes. And it turns out a worm snake will burrow really deep in the soil during a dry season to keep cool. Who knew? So, and I used to teach science, boys and girls, so I thought I knew a lot about the creatures, but you know what? There's so much to know. Then I talked about night and nightmares. Oh, when I talked about New Year's Eve tradition. So you could talk about New Year's Eve as well. Maybe there was a really cool New Year's Eve that you spent with your family that was just very memorable and you wanted to capture that. All right, and let's see what we're going to next. Okay, so the next one is for the letter O. So for the letter O, boys and girls, you do have a required entry, and it is called the flip side. So let's talk about that for just a minute. When you think about the flip side, okay, and you're thinking about a quarter, let me see if I can bring this up here, right? A quarter has 2 sides. It has the heads and the tails, all right? So one side we could think about as one point of view, right? But when you flip the coin over, right? There's the other point of view. We always know that there's 2 sides to every story. And most things that have a pro also have a con, or vice versa. And so that's what we're going to be writing about on the flip side. What I want you to do is take a situation and think about that situation from the 2 different sides, right? From the positive side and the negative side. So if we look at our actually, let's look at my example first, and then we'll go back and look at a possible example for you guys. Okay, and I did a template for you on here, so you should have that. So for the letter O, on the flip side, the title should be there for you. So in the middle, you will see that it says on the flip side. So on one side, you're going to talk about the negative, right, or the cons of a situation. And on the other side, you're going to talk about the positives, all right? So let's see what mine says. I'm the youngest of 6. This means that I watched all of my older siblings get to do things first, like ride a 2-wheel bike, learn to drive, go shopping alone with friends, or ride the roller coaster. You get the picture. On the flip side, since I was the youngest, I got lots of love and attention from all of my older brothers and sisters. They continue to love and support me and I will always be their baby sister, no matter how old I get. All right. And I also did one on O, an onomatopoeia poem, and you could add something else to that too. Remember, each of these don't have to be the only thing that you do. So if you have something else for the letter O that you want to include, that would be added on to this entry, because on the flip side is a required entry. Okay, so let's look at what you're going to do for the letter O. And this is on your template here. So when you see your template, you will see where it says on the left-hand side, write text here. And this should be like the negative view. Okay, so remember, you're going to take that out, right? Because you're going to take out anything that I put. You're going to leave the title there, though. And you're going to write about something, that has two viewpoints for you. So when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about a new one besides being a sibling, I thought about all the things about online teaching. So I kind of put the title up there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put all my notes either on a sheet of paper, and I just put them up here for you to see. You won't leave them on your paper because your ideas are going to actually go in the box. So online teaching can be very frustrating. All right, first of all, my internet goes out. My internet was in and out all day yesterday. So that was very frustrating because I couldn't grade papers. And then I got kicked out of my meeting. All the home interruptions. Okay, so one time we had the neighbor was taking down trees and that was noisy. My dog barking today, who wouldn't stop. We have more meetings now than I feel like we used to, because it's not like Mr. Tunstall can just, pop in the room or tell us what he needs to tell us, or, we can just pop down the hall, the ELA teachers, and have a quick meeting to talk about what's going on. So, we all have to have these online Zoom meetings or Google Meet meetings. Communication is tough. And that's another thing, if you guys have a question, you can't just come up to me or talk to me in the hallway between classes. You're going to have to email me or come to a Google Meets or, write something on stream. I'm worried about you guys, and I know your teachers as we talk. We're worried about some of you guys too. Some of you we haven't heard from, and that's kind of scary. And, are you getting enough to eat? Are you, is your internet working? Are you having, difficulty just in general? And then just missing the day-to-day interactions, not only with my colleagues and my teammates, but just with you guys and everybody else in the school situation. Okay, so what I did is I just made a few notes about some of the things that are frustrating about online teaching and some of the things I worried about. So I'm going to put my ideas down first, and I can write them on a sheet of paper, or I can put them on my template, and then when I'm done putting them in a narrative on the left-hand side, then I can undo them. So I'm just going to start out and show you kind of how I'm going to add these ideas in here. And boys and girls, I don't have to put every single thing in here, but I can try to get most of them. All right, so on the flip side, so online teaching has been very frustrating. Okay, right, so I can use some transition words here, right? To begin with, my internet right here is sketchy, sketchy. See how I corrected that when the red came in? And tends to go out when I need it most. Okay. So see, anytime I have a red, guys, if I click on it, just going to go back and fix it. Okay. Also, comma, another transition words. There are many interruptions in my house, such as fire alarms that went off recently, dogs barking, etc. Okay. In addition, let's see. In addition, I have another transition word. E-D-D-I-T-I-N. In addition, I still spelled it wrong. Okay, there we go. In addition, it seems like there are more meetings. I'm going to say more work meetings. As we don't get to more meetings as we don't get to see each other every day. Okay, so I can come back here. I'm going to take out some of these things I've already included. All right. And then I'm going to look at my last two. I think I just talked about, no, I didn't add my day-to-day. So now I'm going to add my other thing too. Finally, I am worried about my students' health and well-being. Okay, and remember I said you didn't have to put everything on there. So now that I've put all my ideas in my template, I'm going to take this part out because I've already captured them in there. Okay, so that's everything that is annoying. Now, on the other side, I want to write some of the good things, right? And there are some positives to being at home. Okay, so on the flip side, SIDE, comma, okay, there are some positives to online learning. Okay, first, I don't have to wake up at 5 o'clock anymore. Don't, I'm trouble with my typing again. I don't have to wake up at 5 to get ready for the day. Okay, I can sleep in until 7. A big thing, boys and girls, 2 extra hours. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I'm talking about my internet being sketchy. Okay, so first I don't have to wake up at 5 to get ready for the day. I can sleep in until 7. Although the internet sometimes goes out, for the most part, it is working, and I can grade or do my work anywhere, inside or outside. When the weather's nice, boys and girls, I love sitting on the porch and the dogs are hanging out with me, and then I can grade papers or I can work on the lessons for the week. Okay, so let's see what else I can talk about. Seems like there are more meetings. Okay, even though there are more meetings, it is still nice to see my friends. And colleagues on Google Meets. Okay. Finally, I do get the chance to see my students when they log into Google Meets with me twice a week. Okay, there you go. So that's how your flip side can go, okay? Write all your notes so that you can think about them, put it in a narrative. Remember, it's not, you don't see 1 or 2 sentences, right? lots of different things that I'm talking about. So you could talk about your siblings as well, being the oldest or the youngest. You could talk about the online school, online lessons, the pros and the cons. Anything that you wanted to on this, you can. All right, so that pretty much wraps us up for LMNO this week. Remember that as you are working, before you turn in your work, right, you're going to make sure that you've edited. You're going to make sure that you've read it aloud to make sure that you didn't leave out little words. Check your spelling, right? Check your grammar. Make sure that you don't have 6 sentences without a period, right? That's a run-on sentence. Go through and remember every time where you read, if you feel like you want to pause or stop, that's a good place to put a period. Okay. The other thing that we're still seeing is those lowercase i's when you're talking about yourself, right? When you're talking about yourself, a person, you need a capital I. So make sure that you're checking those before you turn them in and submit. And boys and girls, don't forget to submit your work. I know this has been an issue with all of the 6th grade classes that their teachers are saying, yes, the students have done their work, but they're not submitting it. So you have to make sure that you remember to hit that submit button when you're done so that you can get credit and we can grade. So as we finish up for this week, my husband said that I should sing you a song about our unicorn and the fact that if you don't do your work, what happens to him. All right, so I wrote you a song. This is based on, will you help me build a snowman? Okay, here we go. Pilots, will you please do all your classwork, or at least give it a try? Come on and submit it, please. I'm begging on my knees, so a unicorn won't die. He used to be so happy, and now he's not. He wants you to be wise. Will you please do all your homework before he meets his sad demise? Oh, there he goes. Do your homework. I'm going to have to keep singing and singing and singing until all your homework is done. All right, you guys have a great week. Take care. Do your best work, and we will see you next week.